Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Bob Mount is the program manager for FAA's Traffic Flow Management System, where he leads investment, planning, and execution. Bob also supports the strategic vision for how the FAA will technically meet air traffic control flow management in the coming years. Bob, you out there?
Yes, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, VMware, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to start with just a few words off script from my planned statements around yesterday. So I watched Majors Vito and Zuniga yesterday, and I was really inspired by the energy that they have put into the effort with Army Futures Command. I'll try and share some of the same energy that they brought yesterday. I will tell you though, and I'm going to be very transparent, I think that's an area where we are working as an organization in the Federal Aviation Administration to try and gain some institutional momentum around where we want to go with these opportunities. So that'll be quite a bit about what I speak to today. Some of that challenge around how do we achieve the momentum necessary to bring these changes to the agency. I think it's a common perspective that we share with Army Futures Command and the opportunities that they described yesterday. We see those opportunities as well, still working through how we leverage those opportunities to achieve results. Obviously, as the majors described yesterday, I think they have demonstrated, success both in their approach and in their results, in the words they used and in the products they described. We're working through that as an agency and looking to find similar success in the things that we do. So again, I was inspired by that. And I think these, community of practice forums and discussions are kind of critical to understanding the challenges that everyone faces. So again, my name is Bob Mount. I'm a program manager in the Federal Aviation Administration for the Traffic Flow Management System. A little bit of history on our agency and the TFMS system. The Federal Aviation Administration, of course, has a continuing mission to provide the safest and most efficient airspace systems in the world. We regulate all civil aviation. We oversee construction of airports, often through grants, provide air traffic control and air traffic management functions for the National Airspace System. That is one of the biggest components of the agency and the work that it does in terms of volume and personnel. We oversee certification of personnel and aircraft, and we manage commercial space activities as those aircraft launch and recover back through the National Airspace System. The FAA has approximately 50,000 employees across the United States and a budget of roughly $17.5 billion. I think that's relatively small by some DoD budgets, somewhat larger than other federal agencies, but it's somewhat right-sized for the things that we need to do. About $11 billion of that goes to operations and another $3 billion in capital investments. The rest is disseminated largely through grants and research activities. So just to give you an idea of scale and scope, and you may be asking yourself, why is this guy telling me the history of Orville and Wilbur Wright? Well, in part because I think the culture that the agency carries with it and brings to its mission day in and day out is an important part of who we are and an important part of the challenge that we face in trying to introduce new methods and new business models to our agency. So, and I'm going to second James's comment around speaking without having someone else talking back. We're all on Zoom every day, all the time, but speaking, one way for 30 minutes is sort of an odd paradigm. So within the FAA, as I mentioned, one of the larger organizations is the Air Traffic Organization. Its mission is to oversee and manage the National Airspace System for the United States. That service is provided to over 29 million square miles of airspace, or roughly 17% of the world's airspace. You say the United States doesn't cover 17% of the world's airspace. The United States is also responsible for large oceanic operations over both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, and that's why it's so encompassing. There are over 19,000 airports that are overseen by the FAA and ATO, almost 700 air traffic control facilities, and over 43,000 aircraft daily, which equates to about 16 million flights annually. So that's kind of the size of the operation. Obviously, all of us fly, so we all know the importance and criticality of our mission and that it is executed daily in the best way manageable. The air traffic organization has about 35,000 employees, roughly 14,000 air traffic controllers. The rest are engineers, support staff, technicians, program analysts, et cetera, that keep the operation running. So within that, within those two organizations is an organization described as air traffic systems. So these systems are comprised of mainly two categories. So there is both operational support for air traffic control systems. So these systems, whether it's in the en route phase of flight or in terminal airspace around airports or on the ground at airports, these systems support air traffic control functions of air traffic separation, displaying weather information, providing communication systems and surveillance systems, so all the stuff that we need to do to keep aircraft flying safely throughout the national airspace system. There's another sizable body of systems where my system resides, and that's in decision support systems. So these systems help air traffic control facilities, air traffic operators, and air traffic managers manage traffic volumes and increase operational efficiency throughout the NAS. So within this, there are a handful of systems. I'll just describe them briefly to give you a flavor of kind of what we're doing with these systems. And this is where the traffic flow management system resides. So first, because I'm the one speaking, I get to go first. So the traffic flow management system is the primary strategic planning tool for NAS operations day in and day out. And that's both within the FAA and with our industry partners. Additionally with international flights and commercial space operations as well. So it is a primary planning tool that our command center, that the FAA command center utilizes for its planning and execution daily. It also provides for the tactical response of weather events, military operations, commercial space activities, et cetera. So as things change and the need for the plan changes day in and day out, the TFMS system is used to execute on those changes as necessary. There are other systems such as the time-based flow management system, which provides for time-based scheduling into and out of major airports, right? That helps control volume and efficiency into those airports. The terminal flight data manager, which provides terminal scheduling data, right? This is kind of runway to gate and vice versa, providing that information for ground operations, especially at the busier airports, as most of us have flown in and out of. Enterprise Information Display Systems provides operational information throughout operational facilities, and the NAS space integration capability. So this is relatively new, and this provides commercial space vehicle launch and recovery information to controllers around the country, which is an increasing component of the work that we do. So the traffic flow management system, so this, we're gonna get down into it. Categorized as a decision support system, TFMS provides the primary automation tool for disseminating air traffic management information, planning and executing of air traffic management initiatives. Additionally, this is the primary tool for coordinating industry information back and forth, both in terms of strategic planning and tactical response to operational impacts. Again, I'm going to use the weather example. When a large thunderstorm settles in over Atlanta and flights need to be routed around that body of weather, right? This system helps provide the planning for that and the execution of that, both in terms of flights in the air and flights on the ground that need to be either delayed or held until it's safe for them to depart and get to that destination. So some specific examples, if you've flown a lot and you've heard some of these terms, if you have a ground stop or a ground delay, weather response reroute, those are all functions that are supported by our system, by the TFMS system. In addition, we have industry operational management. So as air carriers, general aviation, business aviation are affected or are planning for events, they will coordinate with the FAA, oftentimes through this system, to make those plans and to make those changes to their plans as they need to reflect operational needs. Coordination of military operations is a key component of the TFMS system, as well as monitoring and coordination of international operations. So especially pre-COVID, as we had a number of, the international operations were considerable, certainly much more considerable than they are now. There was extensive coordination of those activities through the TFMS system. And as I mentioned, the commercial space vehicles, which are increasing in their numbers year by year. And so, the need for robust and more detailed, more granular awareness of those activities is frequently coordinated through this system. So it is a general statement, I would say this, right? So those are kind of all the functions that we provide, both for this system and for others. Aviation data is generally complex. It's very operational specific, and it has sort of unique knowledge requirements for the data elements. And when I get into discussing a little bit of our observations around the VMware Tanzu efforts and initiatives in our agency, we'll talk a little bit about that, because the data supply and the data feed and the data sources are sort of critical elements to what can be done, as it is with any system and any product. In this case, there's such a novelty or maybe uniqueness around what we're trying to do. There are no other business models. Aviation is sort of in and of itself. There aren't a lot of other business models that use off block times or other data that are somewhat specific to aviation operations. So a little bit about our system. So the system itself comprised of a little over 1,300 servers and workstations, more than 100 interfaces, both internal and external, about 3.6 million lines of code. There are 23 core applications and approximately 21 auxiliary applications. I think to many other public and private sector systems, it's not an extraordinarily large system. However, it is large and somewhat complex by the standards of FAA NAS systems. And it directly impacts NAS operations for both the FAA and industry. So it's very visible and burdened with the need to support a very broad user community. So, when issues occur, the TFMS system is one of the first ones that gets looked at for helping to identify both either what the problem is, system-wide in the NAS, or what solutions might be available. So how do we manage this system? So the TFMS program office, a first level maintenance organization and a second level maintenance organization, these are all internal to the agency, collaborate to provide system availability as a critical component of daily NAS operations. This is a common management structure for NAS systems. So the program office takes and manages capital investments into the technology. The first level maintenance organization operates the system, provides its periodic maintenance, provides help desk support, etc. The second level organization provides engineering support, issue tracking, issue analysis, system management functions. That, again, very common throughout most of our systems in the NAS. So it is a kind of a tried and true model that we're comfortable with and that has worked, right, to develop systems that are very reliable, very dependable. Currently, to give you scope, right, currently we work on a nominal baseline of about a $25 to $30 million annual capitalized investment into the system, and a sustainment model that reflects another $20 to $25 million annually in operating budgets. So that's, again, kind of trying to frame up where we're coming from. Okay, so a little bit on the history. So I mentioned that it is a relatively large and a relatively complex system by FAA NAS system standards. So what's driving that complexity? So a little bit of history of the system. The system has evolved from a prototype system over almost 3 decades. We have increased scope of products over the system baseline. We have increased reliance on those products in terms of their operational use. So we went from sort of mission routine applications and products to mission essential, and they're teetering on mission critical. That change in terms of how we view TFMS and the work that it does and the functions that it provides didn't come necessarily with any architectural changes. It didn't come with significant enhancements, some enhancements, but maybe not as significant as the changed perspective on how the system would be used might have warranted. So one of our system challenges that we've identified, I think I mentioned earlier on that we have 23 core applications, 21 non-core auxiliary applications. One of our challenges is how do we manage those when we have non-critical applications commingled with these critical applications on the same baseline? It creates some inefficiencies in terms of our maintenance approach. Either we're sliding those mission critical applications in the terms of their maintenance and management, or we're over maintaining or expending more resources than are necessary trying to maintain and manage those applications that are mission routine, very much mission routine in nature. So how do we find that balance and find some efficiencies around that? So we have identified, as part of that question, right? How do we get better with that? How do we move away from the large system-specific infrastructure, and how do we move toward the reusable platform available in a DevOps kind of environment? How do we get away from tech refreshing hardware? How do we get away from the constant system updates and security updates that are necessary for our kind of large iron, big infrastructure kinds of investments that we've made over the years? So again, why so much detail around this and its management and how we manage the system? I think because the history of this is what frames the culture that we exist in today. Our culture around these systems is very firmly established, and it reflects decades of kind of priorities, politics, people that have been here before us, and that we're working through kind of the legacy that they left in the systems that have been left behind. So for me, it's our culture that challenges our forward planning around rapid development and the DevOps environment and some of the things that we're trying to do. And in a sense, to me, that's almost a good thing, right? Because although it is and can be very challenging to change a culture in an organization, it's changeable. So it's not insurmountable. It's not binary. It's not yes or no. It is, yes, we can change these things. We just have to exert the effort and the energy that I mentioned earlier, that the Army Futures Command has shown in their commitment to their progress. Okay. So we see these challenges. We have this big system. We see these challenges. A former agency executive and a mentor to me used to very frequently say, "How do we get better around this?" Right? That was a common thing he would ask, and it goes to what we've been trying to do with TFMS for some time now. And this was frequently an annoying question, right? It didn't matter if we had stubbed our toe or we just knocked it out of the park. The question was always the same. How do we get better on this? Well, the question really reflects another part of our culture that I think is consistent within the aviation community. So aviators do this all the time. It's cornerstone to the safety system that almost all, internationally is recognized as you have to have constant improvement. You always have to learn both from your mistakes and your successes every day. You go back and reflect, right? Whether it was a good day or a bad day, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And how do we learn to go forward? So that's a key element of what we carry with us as part of our culture. That's the good part of the culture, that we have this initiative to try and get better. And I think that's what serves us well in trying to overcome the other parts of our culture that create some inertia around change. So all that brings us to then, for those of you who are saying, "Hey, when do we get into the hook? When do we get into the good part?" Okay, here we go. So all that brings us to a little over a year ago, not quite a year and a half ago, the TFMS program office had an opportunity to partner with VMware around the Tanzu platform and identify some applications or an application that would be good candidates for rapid development on the platform. Right? Again, we have this fundamental desire to get some of the dissimilar and disparate products off of our system baseline, separate them and manage them appropriately based on their need and based on their use. So we partnered with an internal team, right, and with VMware and their team, and said, okay, what do we need to stand this up? We identified a product on our system baseline, which was fly.faa.gov. You're welcome to go to www.fly.faa.gov, and you can take a look at that webpage as it was and has been for almost 3 decades. We identified that as the first candidate for rapid development. So again, it's on the mission routine end of the spectrum, so that made it a good candidate. A little bit of a caveat that the data that it uses to feed that comes from a variety of sources that created a little bit of a challenge, right? And that gets that data source problem. So, as we looked at this, we said, okay, we're trying to evaluate this from a business perspective. We are stewards of taxpayer dollars. We take it very seriously that the money we spend on these products needs to be efficiently used. It needs to provide good results for the aviation community, and we need to provide a good product. So we took a look at the value proposition. And one of the key things I think for us was that most of our user community and our investment community recognized is that the value proposition sort of changes the nature of some of the things we do. So it's not just trying to, carve away at, either cost or schedule or quality, right? We're not looking to take one of the Trinity and say, I'm just going to work one of those angles, it very much changes the scope of the work we do, and that, that changed scope changes the paradigm around what the investment looks like and how that investment and how that business model should be framed. So those were all kind of critical concepts, I think, for us to carry into that initial foray into this effort. So it does present a new business model for us with rapid development. It does impact kind of many of the things that have framed the decades of system development for our agency, and that's where we have this cultural conflict. So from requirements and engineering development to investment analysis and our investment decisions, to our contracts and what contracts we use and how we frame them, system deployment, management system tests, right? To test models. How do we sustain the systems? Many of these require a different approach for this opportunity. However, I think in the first instant, we've been able to take a look at that and at least identify some of those things. Again, full transparency. I'm not sure that we've moved the needle as far as Army Futures Command has in some of these areas. However, I think we've identified them similarly and are approaching them through what I think is a similar approach, again, trying to bring the energy that those guys brought yesterday. So introducing this new business model has required organizational change, and that's what we're working through as we speak now. So fast forward a little bit, unfortunately, for all of us, right? We all lived through the last 12 months of 14, 15 months of COVID. And so that has impacted all of our workplaces, right? We're all sitting here now, probably from home, talking on meetings with Zoom, just like we've been doing for the last 14 months or so. And that's developed a little bit of change. It affected this effort as well. We started this right after the first of the year in 2020, right before we had to take a little bit of a hiatus in terms of how we do our work. What I found interesting was the development work on this continued, right? Some of the other things would be things that were affected. Some of the things I just mentioned around requirements development, investment analysis, some of those things that were, have historically required sort of a face-to-face discussion. As we learn to do some of those things, more natively in the Zoom environment, the product development team and and the partners with VMware were able to keep working on the product development. So that was sort of a pleasant outcome from this, to see that product could go on, that product development could go on. Fast forward then, right? So it took about 2 months to stand up the platform associated with our effort. We call this platform Elroy. So that was the name that was chosen by the team. And I think it goes back to the Jetsons' son, Elroy, for Jetsons fans. It took us about 4 months to develop the product, nasstatus.faa.gov. And if you want to go take a look at that, you can. It's available. So you can go look at either or both and kind of compare them and see kind of how the two compare. And I think you'll find that quite a difference between those two products. The features and interfaces that are currently on NAS status, right, and were previously on FLOT.FAA.gov, they had not been updated much at all in the past 20 years. So introducing modern interfaces, using the rapid development as a means to provide those, were all benefits that our stakeholders, our users, our teams all sought. And so we were able to find that through this effort, and that's a very good thing. Platform Elroy, as is true with the DevOps environment, provides us with a standard set of services with security certification that we want to find through these efforts, right? This is the approach that we're looking to leverage. That's the opportunity we're looking to leverage. And we look to continue to use as additional products are developed, right? That's where the efficiency is. That's where the money is made. Again, trying to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. How do we make money on this? We want to be efficient in how we do this. So, let me jump a little bit to what we experienced in terms of through this effort, right? So I'm offering the perspective of a program sponsor, Majors Vito and Zuniga offered yesterday kind of perspective from a leadership, right? They're leading the change within Army Futures Command I'm sponsoring the change. We have other teams, other leaders within the agency that are leading the teams that support this change more directly. So my perspective may be a little bit different, but what I experienced from my perspective was we achieved and we received executive and stakeholder interest very early on. So the opportunities, again, are somewhat self-evident, at least in terms of, available efficiencies, should we leverage this correctly. Support, so the interest is there. The support is the longer term objective. So, again, for most of our organizations and most of our partners and our stakeholders, right, they see it. How do we get there? That's the question. So especially for our user community representatives, we received almost in the moment, almost instantaneous buy-in from them because they're fully engaged in the product development from the beginning. And that's important. So today we hear that read back to us very regularly. So those are the things we experienced. Now, how do we get to where we want to go? So some challenges that, I think are evident in any changed business model, especially for the work that we're doing in building new systems. It starts with framing an investment a little bit differently, right? Historically, our agency has developed detailed requirements, somewhat low-level requirements to measure success with, right? The outcomes it's somewhat measured as outputs rather than outcomes, whether it's from the investments perspective or from performance on the contract, right? Either one, but we look to those low-level requirements to kind of determine, have we made it? I think they're, again, leveraging the opportunities that we see on this and providing the right level of details, working with our investment community to ascertain what is the level that's needed to move the investment forward, right? It may not look like the same low-level requirements that you're used to getting, but it is a level of requirements that is acceptable, both for our teams, for our auditors, right? We're a federal agency, we get audited like all other federal agencies, and that we can stand in front of, the taxpayers and say, we were smart with this money and here's what we did. Building the right acquisition model. So we're a little bit unique in the agency. Most federal agencies operate under the federal acquisition regulations, or the FAR, DFAR, and DoD. The FAA operates under its own statutorily authorized acquisition model, the AMS. The AMS can be applied very broadly, and it fundamentally provides considerable flexibility. So that's good, right? We have that. We've got that in our pocket. The challenge, I think, again, is how do we leverage that? So we have an opportunity, again, with our acquisition model and the flexibility that the AMS can provide us. How do we leverage that to do these things? And those are the questions that we're asking kind of right now. So the third thing I would mention, right, the third challenge that we found is the design approach. It's a different approach for us. So a complete reliance on a design approach, yes, it's affected by the acquisition model that's selected. It's affected by the requirements that are taken for an investment decision. But the design approach, in this case, offers that early engagement with our user community. The focus on the design has facilitated some of our buy-in. The opportunity for updating, the outdated, clumsy, or inaccurate designs and our legacy tools is very much a plus. So it's not necessarily a challenge, but it is very much something that we identified as kind of a key factor in the approach we took. So the development, the next phase I wanted to mention, the development process itself, and I realize I'm running low on time, so I'm going to speak even faster than I have so far. The development process, that's what we started with. So we very much started with how do we develop these things faster and get them out the door faster? And that's good, right? It was a wedge in the door. That's great. All of these other things around the investments in the acquisition model, the business model that we're trying to apply, the test models, those are the things that go along with that that are still under evaluation, and we're getting there. So one of the things that I noticed and noted about one of our user representatives that made a comment last week to me said, one of the things that he really likes about this is that the software is never finished. And it seems like an odd thing for a user to say, but he then added to that, it's not finished, it's always improving. I'm like, okay, right? Okay, now I see the value you're applying to that. So that was kind of important feedback that I received. Big one for us, changed roles and responsibilities. So where does the work live, right? Where does the product live organizationally? Who's responsible for integration? On the sustainment side, who answers the phone? Who will track the issues? Who will do the performance? Who will perform the analysis on these issues? Those are all good questions, and these are questions we will have to answer and address. I will tell you though, some of the questions seem a little bit like bureaucratic questions, right? So I look at this and go, well, if we're kind of fighting over ownership, then maybe we're fighting about the wrong stuff. I was a little bit envious in the Army briefing yesterday because it seemed that they had some similar challenges on their side, but it also seemed that they found some paths to solution there. And I think this is the kind of forum where those discussions can take place and we can learn from each other around how did you overcome that? Because I think many organizations, especially large public sector organizations, will experience some of the same things.
I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Besides stakeholder engagement immediately and end user collaboration that you spoke of, what other thing stands out to you from a program sponsor level as one of the big benefits of this rapid development method versus the legacy method? For instance, cycle time or the lack of toil because there's an ATO'd Elroy platform, things like that. What stands out to you?
In addition to the cycle, the development time, right? It is the opportunities. It is one, the user buy-in. Right now, I don't necessarily have the same level of user buy-in. That's important for everybody in the public sector. Your user group is if you're not supporting the user group and you're not answering the bell on the things that they need, then you'll be out of business quickly, whether you're in the public sector or private sector. So we have to make sure that we're responsive to the users and their needs. And right now, I can tell you, right, we did this NAS status page in the course of 4 months. I have requirements that we're still sitting on that are at least 4 years old. So it's an order of magnitude in terms of difference in what they receive. The standardization of the platform, the security, the reconstitution availability, right, the reusability of some of these products. These are also things that are very important to us because we know that those demonstrate opportunities for efficiency that we want to take advantage of.
Thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate your time very much, and thanks for sharing your experience. And thank you to the FAA.